Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another fantastic virtual tasting here with us at Becker Vineyards. I'm Rebecca Nelson, your wine club director. And tonight we have a really great wine that we're trying. This is actually the first ever release of this particular varietal for Becker Vineyards. And this is our 2017 Carignan. So I hope you have that in your glass and are ready to get started with us. Tonight we have, of course, back with us again, Jon Leahy, our winemaker. We also have both Dr. Richard Becker and Dr. Joseph Becker with us tonight. And once again, we also have our general manager, Bret Perrenoud. So you've got all the boys this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to them. I hope they take great care of you. I know they will. Enjoy, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thanks for that great introduction. And before I get too wound up, I think I should be very, very calm and ask if one of the Doctors Becker would care to say a few words prior to start.
Just at the beginning of all these programs, we like to remember that we're 6 to 7 months now into this pandemic, lots of suffering, lots of loss, and it's still not clear exactly how we're going to exit. And just a plea to all of us to be as thoughtful and caring and protective of one another as we possibly can. Wear masks whenever it's appropriate. Wear them as a pledge of honor, a badge of honor, and let's march out of this together.
We'll take that.
Couldn't have said it better.
Perfect. Well, let us march out with a good glass of wine and give a few people a momentary break. So, Bret, we've got the Carignan, the 17 Carignan. Can you give us the background how the 3 C's came about?
Yeah, so we always have this experimental, I guess, mindset about what we're doing with the growers and the different things that we're making at the winery. And I know that, making a French style wine has ultimately always been the Becker's goal, and making a great wine, regardless of the region that it was, being mimicked after. But, the growers, for the most part, really do love to grow these Rhone varieties, and they're in smaller batches. So it's not like we're going out and contracting 100 tons worth of Carignan and Counoise. And so, but they were just fun little projects, and that's kind of how it came to be. I really think that, at least in my mind, the intention of when we bought these was to make more Prairie Rôti or a Prairie Rôti style wine. But I just remember as we tasted them, they were so good by themselves. That's how they came out of the cellar.
Yeah, they did, and we really did. It was kind of fun. We decided to do a bit of a little educational series, if you will, just a few hundred cases of each. So, Doc, I do look forward to these because I always like to ask you the history behind the Carignan. So, do you have your cheat sheet notes in front of you?
Thanks, John. Let me think. No, it's not clear whether this grape's origin was in the 9th century BC with the Phoenicians, brought then out of that region by the Romans to Sardinia, and then or whether its origin was in Carignan or Aragon, and maybe that's where the name comes from also. But the name Carignan means a path surrounded by thistles, and so that describes entry of a number of our hill country vineyards. And but it was one of the most widely planted grape. It was the most widely planted grape in France in 1988. Amazingly, 410,000 acres.
Right.
And then between 88 and 2000. Surpassed by Merlot, so that the total planting of Carignan dropped to 236,000 acres. So it's been a very widely planted grape in the central coast of California for jug wine in the 50s. 60s.
Actually, interestingly, Ridge Vineyards is known to have made a good. Had some old Carignan grapes planted in the 1880s, and is known to have made some wonderful Carignan off those vineyards.
Yeah, there's still some very old Carignan up just outside. It would technically be in the Sonoma County Appalachians, just outside of Santa Rosa, on the north side of it. There's a couple of small vineyards up there that have some very, very old Carignan vines. But Doc, you say that because the Crown of Aragon stretched in the 15th century. It stretched from that eastern side of Spain all the way through to the far eastern Mediterranean, through Sardinia, Italy, and stuff. So that's also where they think that may have spread. The modern DNA testing doesn't hold true on the Phoenician theory, more so than just that north east corner of Spain,
right,
coming through. But I'm very happy that it found its ways to the New World, and especially here in Texas. So I want everybody to take a sniff and a taste, and we're going to go around and describe it. And then I want to kind of get back into the wheres and why-fors of Carignan. Oh man, so Bret, what are you getting?
Well, I think it's got a lot of floral notes for a red wine. And I won't steal your thunder that we talked about on the previous, before we got on there, but I do think it has,
steal away. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it has definitely some lighter notes, of floral notes. It's soft. I think the tannins are soft. You're not really getting a lot of barrel, that's off-putting or anything like that. I think it's just a nice, soft kind of Rhone style wine. That's what I would describe it. If you gave this to me blind, I dang sure couldn't tell that it was Carignan by variety, but I would probably guess a lighter Rhone variety.
Joe, what do you think, sir?
I think it's an interesting wine. It's got I think that the nose is really expressive in what I'm tasting right now. We alluded to earlier a little bit of plum on the nose, and it's interesting. This wine should do well in Texas because it tends to do well in the hotter climate, and it has a kind of a nice tannin structure, and it has a nice astringency on the mid palate is what I'm getting.
Doc, the perfume to you?
For me, raspberry and little cranberry, little cinnamon. The grape is interesting. Jancis Robinson says that the only thing it really has going for it is exceptional productivity, but in certain climates, in certain soils,
Right.
It can be wonderful. And I think certainly the grape the wines produced by Ridge, but this, and we've had other grapes that are difficult to get ripe in the other parts of the world, and we get ripe here. And I think the harsh tannins that you might worry about with this are not here so much. I think it's beautiful.
No, they're not. I get in the back there. We were talking before we went live about mincemeat, because of those brown spice herbs that kind of almost the raisiny edge to it. But on the back of the nasal, just kept going, and I realized it smells like cola nut.
Mm-hmm.
It just really has that hint in the very back. It's kind of interesting.
This grape is famous for the grape clusters forming very close to the trunk, and
Right.
It's a problem for mechanical harvesting. And so how did this work out for BJ? Do you know if they had issues with harvest?
I think with their, we have a fairly, our harvester is really efficient. They've got the new, I think it costs $380,000 harvester, so they've got all the bells and whistles on that thing. And again, when we're mechanically harvesting, the idea is that it's shaking so gently in a certain way that it's knocking the berries off, so that you're getting a whole berry. It's not hitting them and popping them. But these do grow pretty tight. They're pretty tight clustered. So, sometimes when those tight clustered ones, when you shake them, they try to hang on a little harder. But again, if you get this thing ripe, which I think we did in this vintage, and again, these are later ripening varieties. So we talk about Mauvais, Carignan, Grenache. Those tend to get later in the season, which sometimes in brownfield, the high temperature could be 75 by the time these start to get ready. They're very late in the season. We usually we're into late September, October most of the time with these. So a lot of times they've been on the vine a long time, and I think that helps kind of loosen them up so they come off easy too.
Yeah, the other concern is always with this grape's always been powdery mildew too.
Yeah, they have to spray it before that cluster closes up. You have to kind of get spray inside of it before it envelops, and if you don't do that, you're kind of up the creek.
Yeah, exactly. So, Doc, Joe, so we added these varietals. Why, besides that they were tasting good, what excited you about these wines that you wanted to bottle them separately?
I just, there's in my mind, there's a few ways to answer that question. One is it kind of harkens back to our original idea of experimenting with Rhone varietal grapes in Texas, what we did with the Viognier, certainly with the Cinsault. We're at some point we may end up having all 13 plus traditional grapes of Beaucastel planted in Texas, but and they've done well, but this is 17. This is the much touted Hurricane Harvey year.
Yes.
When when Hurricane Harvey pushed as we've talked about many times on this, Hurricane Harvey pushed the high pressure out over West Texas and made for a very cool, long growing season. And then, John, I remember we got them, and you kept the Carignan, the Cinsault, and the Counoise all in separate barrels, and they were just they were lights out in the barrel. I mean, I think we certainly probably had some intent for blending, but just the way that they developed in your barrel program was incredible.
So, do you think that would then, because the barrel program was so enjoyable, perhaps we should increase that program?
We should increase the tasting of the barrels.
Whoa. So, Doc,
stop hiding my favorite wines, John. I can't find a lot of the barrels. So.
They're all on a map, and we could load the app on your phone.
I know you can locate them, but I can't locate them.
I do remember when we started talking about this, and it was pretty exciting for me to come out with, that everybody was on the same page about wanting to put a small bottling of these together. I was a little conservative on the edge of wanting to save some aside for some blending, but I just thought, when we did this, that 17 was such a fabulous year to begin with. But let's go back to Bret's comment from earlier about how late ripening it is, and it really is. And in VJ's vineyard, there are a couple of years that we didn't get the Carignan because it went beyond and just kind of fell apart. But even with that late ripening and that beautiful ripening year, the alcohol on this is only a little over 12%. It was, 12.9%. So even with that long growing year, the sugars didn't develop a hell of a lot in there, but the phenolics did. This to me is what you go after when we were talking about ripe, the nose and the palate, not the sugar necessarily.
So to get that, we were at like 23.5, maybe somewhere in there. Is that about right?
Right. Yeah. It was in the mid 23s. And, and that was the other thing too, because I think it was 2016, wasn't it, Bret, or was it 2015 where we just missed the window on the Carignan altogether.
Mm-hmm.
It never got above like 21.
Right.
Yeah. So this, unfortunately, it's also for the farmers probably pretty difficult with late harvest, late ripening up there.
But this also buds out late, so it doesn't get froze. So that's
right.
the balancing acts that they play, is that this is a late butter, late harvester.
Right.
And I think that the challenging part is that this is not going to be something that every single year we can make a single variety of, just in a normal rotation of the season.
Yeah, and we're not going to be able to use it every single year in a good blend, like a Rhone style blend either, which is unfortunate because of the quality of this wine. You were mentioning earlier, Doc, about the how many hectares were planted in France up in 1988, and that was I think that was about the time the great French wine lake, where they came up with that scheme to start pulling acres out on there. This is also an extraordinarily popular varietal in Algeria, along with a couple of other ones, but I don't think this is the one that they use as both a table grape and a wine in Algiers.
One thing I've read, John, is that this grape does very well with the sort of the Beaujolais style carbonic maceration.
Right.
And that seems to have a very nice effect on it.
I see why. Yeah.
So did you do a cold soak, and how did you handle this fruit? Do you remember?
We threw it in a bin and just threw it in the back of the winery. Said we had things to do. I had to get the barbecue roast going. And when we brought it in, of course, because it's harvested, Bret's getting ready to pull the plug on my kid.
When these come in that late, I'm pretty sure that they get added. Yeast gets added very close to the day. I think John is chasing the truck into the driveway to dump the yeast.
Throw the yeast in there. We actually, we did not do an extended maceration on this stock. Simply
Maybe
because
you should.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Can we improve upon perfection? Is that possible? So, yeah, no, with the late time of the year, I think it only got a couple of days before we actually did pitch the yeast. It was perfectly ripe, but with that later harvested fruit, we always are chasing the indigenous fermentation start. And there are a couple of things that we want to make sure are stable in there before fermentation starts. So, you know, I know we hit it pretty hard and heavy to get it into a cold tank, get it stable once it gets in there. But
I think when this was picked, the temperature there was like 65 degrees. I think it hit the back door at like literally, you got there at like 58 or something. It was cold.
Yeah, so, you know, from that temperature will take a couple days on its own just to come up enough just to allow the yeast to grow. So, you know, it did get a couple, 3 days on there, but I'm not off the top of my head. I don't remember doing an extended maceration on this.
John, here's a question I have. Both this wine and Mourvèdre are famous, have a reputation for having a raw meat character on the nose when you first open them, first smell them.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that because I get more of that meatiness off of Syrah than I do this
Yeah.
one.
I do too.
Yeah.
Well, but all three, where is that coming from? Do you understand the biochemistry of that?
Well, not to the extent that a real chemist would, but the thiols that you're talking about, that
That's what's sitting here.
yeah, you know, and I do believe that that's going to be the same edge that you know, I wish I was in my office right now. I have all of those diagrammed out in a nice little chart. The thiol, which is a little cross diagram on there, is the same, if I'm remembering correctly, as earthiness. And meatiness and earthy or smokiness are on the exact same, and it appears different by varietal. It's not a different complex at all, not a different molecule at all. It's the same. It's perception from that varietal. So there's some other things interacting there. You know, with over 1,100 individually identified chemical constituents to a grape, I am sure more than 2 of them interact together. There's my extent of chemistry. That, and you know, for some reason, don't ever mix pure iodine and dish soap together.
One of the things that I think that's interesting when you look at this on the wine spectrum for Carignan, it like lands dead center in the middle of their slide between Petit Syrah and Pinot Noir.
Right.
And I think that and again, those flavors are more fruity, but not as full bodied. And I think that that's, you know, what it's supposed to taste like. And I do think that, you know, the challenges of trying to get it ripe every single year are going to be ongoing. But it's just really interesting to me that like we can make these 3 versions of these grown varieties, and they're just so unique in their own right.
Mm-hmm. Well, somebody just said, yuck, I don't know what to. I hope not the wine. So Trish, what did you mean by yuck? If you guys have questions, by the way, please ask them. You know, we keep referencing the 3 C's, and somebody I saw earlier somebody wanted to know what that was. So that's the 2017, we bottled this, the Carignan, a little bit, the Counois, and the Cinsault. So those are the 3 things that we refer to as the 3 C's. To answer that question. So I would like to get your opinion on what you think of this versus an old world version, Doc. What do you have anything on the forefront of your mind that would come?
Well, I think the Côte de Rhône blends would have always had a significant amount of Carignan. You know, they're not relying on Carignan instead of more of the Syrah, Grenache, Mourvèdre base, because when so much of it was planted, 400,000 acres were planted in France. So a lot of the Côte de Rhône will have this at their base.
Right.
And, you know, maybe this needs to be less in those blends. And I don't think they make the effort that we did to barrel age this and before they blended. Probably much of it was in stainless steel, so a very different expression.
Well,
maybe not as ripe. Also,
right,
yeah.
Right. I found it, and it's very interesting. You know, we frequently will have customers ask about Pinot Noir, which we do
right.
grow. You know, I'm only aware of 1 or 2 little vineyards that actually grow them in North Texas. But you know, it's not the same. I'm not saying it's the same, but I think of the 3 C's, the Counois Carignan offer a similar track to what a lot of people are looking for when they're after that Pinot Noir. So Joe, you're a Burgundy guy. What do you think in comparison? If you really had your heart set on it, would this satiate or not?
You know, it's interesting, John, because when we do the Riedel tastings, I think we all know that the Carignan and the Counoise always light up so well in the Burgundy glass. And you know, it's interesting that what the character that we get from this wine, we allowed it to allowing it to ripen a little bit longer in our warmer climate.
We have a warm climate?
No.
But Bret, what do you think? Now that we've had these three offerings, what do you think of the Carignan as a standalone wine?
Well, I think in this particular vintage, obviously it worked for me. I mean, I think when we pick wines, we don't just do it because we have them. We do have a standard that we, and again, when we do our blind tastings, we may have an old world style wine, and luckily enough, we get to try those at home. And again, I think that, like Doc was saying, that probably that most of the Côtes du Rhônes that you tried don't necessarily have a huge percentage of this, but it's always, and again, I think that's why we bought it. If you ask me, why did we contract this fruit? It was because we wanted to make a Rhône style wine, regardless of whether it made a single varietal by itself. We wanted to have it to add the fruit notes and that raw meat note that we were talking about that it tends to have. And it just worked out in this particular vintage that it was good enough on its own. And that's how we do things, by the way. I always say this over and over. We kind of name the wine after it's made itself, after it's presented what it wants to be through the cellar. We go back and kind of name it and figure out what to do with it after it's already been made, if that makes any sense. We kind of do it backwards, but.
Well, but I mean, it does make more sense to figure out what the wine is first. Okay, so we are getting questions on the label.
The funny thing about this is that most of the decisions to plant these unusual varietals like Counoise and Carignan and Cinsault and Dolcetto are not made by us and not made in consultation with us. A grower calls and says, how would you like 20 tons of Carignan? And we say, good idea.
Well, the first thing he says is, how good is it? That was the first thing that we said.
That's how good is it?
That's good.
Exactly.
Well said, Bret.
We've got questions on the label, and the label, the artwork that was picked for the 3 Cs. This one is the steamship in what looks like a rather stormy night. So what behind that label? Do we know anything about that painting?
Go ahead, Joe.
I just want to, I don't so much, but I think what's interesting is, all of our paintings are Tony Bell paintings, and I give a lot of credit to Bret for finding these paintings. I don't know if he has any comments about, finding these old paintings of Tony Bell's and really doing a nice job on our labels.
Well, and I think that when I first started, I remember that we were working on the Malbec label. That's the current regular Malbec, and Doc and Bunny brought in this slide, and I think I told the story before, but it was an old school slide that they wanted me to go have digitized and put on that label. And so when we did that, we went ahead and a couple years later went ahead and did all the slides that you guys had and put them on a file, because I was so scared to lose that slide, the one representation of that painting if there was another one. I remember I put it in a briefcase and I locked it on my arm, kind of like you see the dudes walking through the, with a bale of money in it, but I put it somewhere I wouldn't lose it, went to the label company. And then since then we have this, I think there's about 100 photos that came out of those slides. And a lot of them are like the warthog cartoons that he did.
Wonder Warthog.
Yeah, Wonder Warthog. Sorry. And so as we're going through these, some of them really make really nice wine labels, and then there's like a picture of a bird that's a cool picture, but I really haven't seen where we can use it yet. It's like a weird seabird stent, but it's a gorgeous painting. It just doesn't kind of quantify to the wine. And so immediately when we were looking for this one, I started going through them, and there was 3 seascapes. So we call this the 3 Cs again. There was 3 sea paintings, and we started lining them up. And I think originally my vote was to take the one that we liked the best and put it on all 3 labels so that it was a series of those. And I got outvoted, which again was perfectly, that was the right call. One of those paintings I really don't love that much, but it looks really good on the wine label. And the challenging part is trying to see what it's going to look like with the darkness of the wine. You know, the shade of this is a lot lighter than some of our other red wines, and so you can kind of see through it. And that does influence the way that the label looks. And so that's what we have to do when we're doing this. And it just comes about because we do a lot of permutations of it, I guess, on the labeling side too.
The wonderful story aspect of this story for me, or there are many, but one is that after Tony died, he and Claire had a beautiful remote Victorian house near Brady, and Claire was gone, and it was struck by lightning, and everything that Tony ever painted or sculpted or designed or created, and that was in that house and lost, except for this box of slides that Claire gave us and that Bret had digitized. And so without that, everything that Tony ever did would be lost. And it's amazing how many people knew about his expertise as an artist. And, you know, every year at the winery, people come and say, you know, I knew Tony Bell 50 years ago. I knew his work. And it's really wonderful the way we've been able to memorialize this. And we were talking at one of our recent meetings about making a book of a reproduction of these great watercolors, the ones that have been on the labels. And and Bret was going to talk to our artist in residence, Chrissy, about getting that going. But I think that would be a great thing to do.
So Don, were the slides at your house when the fire happened? Is that right? The box of slides were at your home?
Yeah. She had sent them to us, and we picked some out. And we used a couple of them at that point, and you know that everything else was lost. Everything.
So I think then we need to use Wonder Warthog on a wine label.
Tony would go for that, I can tell you. So would Gilbert Shelton.
Oh, well, then if we're going to get Gilbert in here, then we need to put the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers on a wine label.
That's right.
But there's a couple things in that slideshow. I don't know how old he was. I think there's a picture of a horse that he painted when he was like, I think you might have said he was like, when he was like, how old?
3.
Yeah. It was like this cool.
Okay, guys, we are now approaching that golden moment of what food would you personally put with this particular wine? So, Bret, I'm gonna give you one more shot.
Well, I think that again, most of the time when you look at this type of wine, it's something that's a little bit lighter, but a lot of flavor. So, like, you know, in the book it says you should use fowl, you know, roasted turkey, or, you know, all the things. I don't want to steal everybody, but I think that again with those softer flavors, you kind of have to tone it down a little bit. This would probably not be the best wine to put with my favorite, you know, tenderloin selection, but again, one of those that's a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Joe, what do you think, sir?
I'm agreeing with Bret. I was actually thinking about you know, maybe a Cornish game head, you know, with sort of a nice lighter currant sauce, or you know, something that would really bring out the fruit in this wine.
Okay, Doc.
2 things. This because of the cranberry notes in this wine, I think and because of the orange notes and the acidity, it would be wonderful with turkey dinner on Thanksgiving.
Sure.
But also, it's been paired forever with manchego, and our chef Michael Lockhart has found a combination of manchego slices dipped into truffle honey.
Yes.
And that would be just wonderful with this, I think. We'll mention that to him.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, for me, a Copper River Red salmon, plank grilled Copper River Red salmon with this wine. I think that would just be a superb pairing. And somebody suggested online Eggs Benedict, and I'm like, man, that's fine. Wine at breakfast is great.
My favorite breakfast.
Right. But, you know, I do think when you are pairing this particular wine, I do think you have to be careful with the fat. You know, we're talking about higher tannin wines going with more fatty foods because they complement each other. They come together. But I really do think that there's not enough tannin in this wine to pair with something very fatty, like a heavy beef dish may overwhelm the wine. So that all of those other choices, though, wild fowl, you know, partridge would be great, or any of those ideas, absolutely. So I guess we should probably tell everybody what's in the bottle, huh? Since we haven't done that.
Red
So
wine.
well, it's from the Ready Vineyard up in Brownfield. Now this is 97% Carignan and 3% Cabernet Sauvignon. So the both from VJ's property there in 2017. So the Cabernet that we decided. So when we were tasting this blend, I used a couple of different things. One, I did use the Cabernet, of course, but then we also tried it with just a little bit of Merlot. I also tried it with a little bit of Cinsault in there, and that did not go over well at all. The Merlot was okay, but we ended up going back to the Cabernet 2 weeks in a row. So that Cabernet offered just enough of its mid-body structure to keep that wine going from front to back. So
John, I think it would be fun to pour this wine with some winemakers from the Rhone Valley, because I think they would be amazed by the subtle, delicate notes coming out of this wine.
So Bret, why don't we put a couple of cases in those suitcases and we'll head over there and do that.
We need a private jet, by the way, too. So we don't,
Thanks.
Exactly. Okay. So next, so this coming Friday, before I forget, the wine that we'll be doing, and it's out on my kitchen counter and I can't see it from here. So Bret, what are we doing on Friday?
I'm pretty sure it's Culinaria.
Okay, the 2016.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the 2016 Culinaria on Friday, which will be fun. I hope you guys are looking forward to it. You guys should prep a snack, your favorite snack food, and try it with the wine. And I'm gonna look at the comments on Facebook to make sure you guys are having something with the wine while we're talking about it. And so next week, then we have the 3 Jolies. Is that correct?
yes.
Yeah, so the 17, 18, and 19 on there. So that'll, and we're going to start with the 17 on Monday and go up 17, 18, 19, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So if you haven't ordered that yet, please do. It'll be a fun, I know it's rosé, but I think you guys are in for a heck of a treat. It's going to show the permutation of how that rosé is developed.
That one's been flying out of there. So that one we picked good. I mean, we were all worried about giving 3 rosé wines, but it must be selling well because it's hot, and people are buying that one like crazy. So make sure you get that one. Then the following week we're doing the Chardonnays, the vertical, the Canada Chard, and then we'll release, I think, probably by the end of the weekend what the following week's going to be through August. So it should be pretty cool. Somebody just asked, referencing back to the blend before we get going any further, I did want to spot that question. They asked, what is the most flexible grape for blending? Is it Cabernet? And no, Cabernet is not very flexible for blending at all. It's very domineering. So you got to be very, very careful. But there is no one more flexible grape than others. I think the French always think the Alicante Boucher, they call it the doctor because of its heavy, intense color and tannin structure. In Texas, we kind of use a couple of different grapes in that respect, like Tannat and Estate Petit Syrah seems to find its way a lot of different
places.
Yeah,
well, there's that, I guess. Okay, so that would probably be my personal most flexible, yes, would be the Petit Syrah. Doc, I think you have a favorite wine grape to blend. What is that?
Well, I was just thinking, truly a really good Merlot. Is a great blender in Texas, and this would love to have a little bit of Merlot in it. I think it has to be the right one and the right texture.
Right. So I was looking for Petit Verdot for that answer.
Yeah, Petit Verdot and Grenache are the 2 blenders I think.
Oh, Grenache is Grenache is a very good choice. It does do very well. So as a blender, so that's great. Okay.
And this would love Grenache too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final words of wisdom, gentlemen?
Joe?
Just everybody to be safe, and we will continue to be there with a glass of wine to share with everybody.
I raise my glass to that one. So everyone out there, thanks for joining us on your Wednesday, for allowing us in your homes for a few minutes. And I hope we've managed to bring you another good glass of wine. So cheers, good health, and great wine.
Thank you.